Hello and welcome to the Blockade podcast. My name is John, and joining me today is Caleb. What's up, Caleb?
How's it going?
Caleb's first time on the show here. Caleb hung out with us at Star Wars Celebration in Chicago, but I don't think we never recorded like on the floor or anything like that, did we?
No, we did not.
Yeah, so no recording on the floor, no appearances on the show yet. But Caleb's been listening for a long time, right?
Yeah. Been listening since day one.
Day one.
Yeah. Wow. Took over 4 years, but I finally made it on the podcast.
Yeah. Happy to have you here. And you're a big Star Wars Resistance fan, a big Star Wars animation guy, right?
Oh, absolutely. I love the Star Wars animation.
Okay, cool. So, the Star Wars Resistance season 2 kind of came and went. I mean, to be honest, not to throw shade at anybody, but basically the Mandalorian showed up and that was it for Star Wars Resistance, as far as I could tell, like in the Star Wars discourse.
Yeah, it just seemed like bad timing for Star Wars Resistance with the Mandalorian and the Rise of Skywalker. Obviously, I mean, that dominated the conversation for months. So, like you said, it came and went with nearly any talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Rise of Skywalker, like even had that come out and there had not been the Mandalorian, I feel like people would have like kept up with watching Star Wars Resistance, but even for me, I love Resistance. I've been watching it all along, but like when The Mandalorian came out, I ended up being like 5 or 6 episodes behind on Resistance. Like I wasn't keeping up with it all the time. And I feel like I am in the, as far as like most people, like Star Wars fans online or whatever, like I'm pretty, I'm more into Resistance than most people. I feel like, like it didn't get a lot of love from Star Wars fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, it definitely had to do more with having a second TV show out there, because even going back to like old seasons of Rebels, there were movies going on at the same time as that. But people were still talking about Rebels while it was happening. Resistance season 1, I guess, had the advantage of no movie because we had Solo. And so that was in a totally different time of year. But yeah, there's, it got completely overshadowed. Yeah,
which is a shame because I think it's really good. And I think season 2 is for sure better than season 1. Which I did like, but I think season 2 was better. And then I think the second half of season 2 was like, for sure, the show really hit its stride and was like super good at that point.
Yeah.
Now you, Caleb, just this weekend watched all of season 2 of Star Wars Resistance, right?
Yes, I did.
That's crazy. I mean, that's cool. You said it was only like 6 hours or something to get through.
Yeah, maybe 6-7 hours to get through the whole thing.
Okay. All right. So it's not that bad. That's essentially the equivalent of watching, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi in the same weekend or something. Yeah. A little more, I guess. But I've certainly been down that path before, watching 3 Star Wars movies in one weekend. So cool. Well, what was your impression of watching like the season 2 like all together like that? Like how was that experience?
I mean, I think I enjoyed it even more rewatching it, just because I think it goes back to this whole thing. There was so much Star Wars stuff going on all at the same time. Resistance was never at the front of mind, and so I don't think I was keeping up with like the plot points as well, like the through point of the whole season. And so I was just like, you'd watch it and it was just kind of there, and then you moved on and you would maybe fall a couple episodes behind and catch up. Watching all the way through, you could tell really when it got to the second half of season 2 how it really picked up, and you could just, it felt a lot more cohesive, and it was a really good story, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, because we both went to the Star Wars Resistance panel at Celebration, and we saw the first episode of the season. And I remember after like the high, I guess that was the season finale of the first season, the Colossus like escaping into hyperspace and all that. I was like, oh my God, where's this show going to go in season 2? And I enjoyed the season premiere of season 2, but it also was like it felt like it was very much back to like, okay, well, this is going to be a very light, which it is, and it remained, and that's cool. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like early into season 2, it felt sort of like, my expectations are starting to be, reduced and stuff. But the whole Tam thing was really interesting. Mm-hmm. But in my memory of it, because I've just watched them as they've come out and I haven't really gone back and rewatched any, my memory of it is that like the Tam stuff was pretty few and far between in the first half of the season. Really until like the last 4 or 5 weeks, there was a Tam thing here or there,
Yeah.
you know, like every third or fourth episode, maybe you'd get a little. Is that accurate, or is that just like my memory of it?
I would say that's my big takeaway watching it. You know, as I was going through the season again, I was like, yeah, there's really like not as much Tam. Like you would have thought that she would have had like a B story in like almost every episode because she was a main character, and you know, with the way the season concluded, like that was a big deal to watch her journey. And the first half of the season, we didn't get a lot of her journey on, you know, until the end. You know, like you were saying. So I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show was obviously aimed towards a younger audience, and so maybe the focus was more on a week-to-week basis. The focus was more on like, let's give kids what they want. So, you know, a fun story that you don't have to, you know, sometimes with Clone Wars and Rebels, especially Rebels, Clone Wars was so all over the place. I guess maybe this isn't true, but with Rebels, you know, if you were jumping in season 3, episode 9 or something, and you hadn't seen the 8 episodes before, it's not like it was unwatchable, but it was a very, that continuity was strong from beginning to end, you know? There was a continuing narrative, whereas in Resistance, I mean, yes, that's the case, but definitely I think like part of the focus of that show was to be more standalone episodes.
Yeah.
Just little adventures, not high stakes, you know, so you could jump in at any point, just grab an episode and watch it. And that's probably part of why they didn't push the Tam thing, you know, constantly throughout season 2. But
yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Resistance finale. We don't have time to talk about every episode of season 2, and I don't think anybody wants to listen to that in one podcast episode. Anyways, maybe in 10 years it'll be fun to go back and do a total rewatch of Star Wars Resistance and really give it its due. But at this point, I feel like the hunger for Star Wars Resistance is it's waning. You know, there's not a ravenous appetite, but I love the season finale. I really, really, really am impressed with it. I've watched it 2.5 times. We'll get into it as we talk about it, but like to me, it's one of the best, you know, hour of Star Wars animation ever. I think it was fantastic. So I definitely do want to give this finale episode its due. So this whole episode is going to be focused on that. Initial impression of the season finale, Caleb, are you as high on it as I sound like I am? Or I mean, like,
yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it definitely had that more epic quality to it. Like you said, the show is geared towards a younger audience, and a lot of the episodes, you know, they're very standalone, but, you know, and they're smaller stakes. But, like, this was, you know, I think some of the biggest stakes we'd had. You know, it was very, had that epic quality to it that we come to love from Star Wars.
It felt like, to me, it almost felt like a little Star Wars movie, you know? And, like, I haven't gone back and watched season finales or series finales from Rebels in a long time. And you know, I love Rebels, but I don't know. There's just something about this where I was like, I watched it the first time and I was thrilled, and then I watched it again with my kids, and I was like, this is, you know, I feel like I can go back to this and watch it repeatedly. Just these 2 episodes. What's really, I don't know how. Did you DVR it, or how do you watch it? Like, you watch it live?
Yeah, I watch them on my Hulu Live TV. So
Okay.
I list it as one episode, just one long episode, which is different to earlier in the season because they had a couple of times where they would do 2 episodes in one night, which would be the same length, but they were listed as separate episodes. This one was just one continuous long episode.
Yeah, same. So I watched it on, or I do watch Resistance on YouTube TV, and yeah, it was just listed as The Escape, and it was 45 minutes long. Yeah. So rather than StarWars.com refers to it as Escape Part 1 and Escape Part 2. But yeah, it's just like this 45-minute long little contained Star Wars movie. And I feel like if it was, you know, 20 minutes longer or something, it could be like a standalone animated movie for Disney Plus or something, you know? Yeah. Which I don't know if that kind of thing is in the works or not, but a story like this, you know, hour and 10 minutes long or something like that, I think would be great. And as much as I loved Resistance throughout, I don't think I could look at any other episode of the show. I don't think I could look at the season 1 finale or any other like segment of this show and be like, this is just like this perfect little Star Wars story that could stand on its own and just be like a really fun, you know, hour plus, I guess. I mean, the episode is not, but I feel like they could extend it out just a little bit, and then it could be that. You know?
Absolutely.
So, it had, I just felt like Star Wars movie storytelling almost in the nature of the kind of story it was, I guess. So, not to beat that. What's like the equivalent of a dog in Star Wars? I don't know. I was gonna say not to beat that Well, actually, the idiom is not to beat that horse to death.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do well with idioms. I don't know if you've listened to the show, Caleb. I do this kind of thing all the time. All right, well, let's just jump into talking about the episode kind of bit by bit then. It opens up with a slew of Star Destroyers attacking that planet Eos, which we'd seen a couple episodes previously.
Yep.
It's like a beautiful water planet with some fishy alien species there, right?
And apparently there was a rebel base there at one point.
That's what it sounds like, yep.
Yeah,
so
which was interesting.
Similar to Crate and Agent Colossus, I think is the name of the planet from the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker. Abandoned rebel bases that become resistance bases, sort of. But that was the episode that featured the Colossus and the Resistance crew kind of hanging out there on that planet was one of the stronger ones in season 2. I thought I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was cool that they kind of brought it back there to, see this final example of the First Order really being savage. And
right.
We needed something for Tam to see and say, all right, well, I can't hang with this First Order stuff anymore.
Yeah, this becomes her breaking point. I mean, we'd seen her conflicted on multiple times with the Colossus group, wanting to like help them out, and a few times conflicted about those people individually. But this was more of a broader example of her just seeing, the nastiness of the First Order and be like, I don't want to be part of this. I want to be a pilot, but this is so far beyond. It's not worth being a pilot to be with people that do things like this.
Yeah. Her Finn, on Jakku.
Right.
Moment, I guess you'd say. But I read on StarWars.com, they do like an episode breakdown for every episode of Resistance, which is easier to miss, I think, with Resistance, because with Rebels, they had the, what was the name of the show on YouTube?
Is it Rebels Recon?
Rebels Recon. Yes, I love Rebels
with
Recon.
Andy?
With Andy, and they would talk about the episode guides. They'd like bring up the fact that those episode guides were out. And so I haven't been checking them, but I did for this episode. And I guess that was originally scripted as a different planet. I forget the name, but not one that I was familiar with. So the first draft of the script, it was just going to open up on destroying a planet. And then they changed it to be Eos, which I don't know that Tam has any association with Eos, right?
No, she wasn't ever there. It was just the rest of the Colossus group. Yeah,
so to her, it's an evil act destroying this planet either way. But for us as an audience, then we're more familiar with, which makes it that much more intense. So I thought that was cool. Then we get, shortly after that, we get the Kylo Ren sequence. How do you feel about Kylo Ren in Resistance? We only saw him maybe twice?
Maybe, I think we saw him maybe at the end of season 1, and then not again until the end of season 2. They used, other villains that we knew from the kind of trilogy as placeholders. We had Phasma, I think, early in season 2, and then Hux showed up a couple of times. But yeah, this was like the first time I think we had seen Kylo Ren in a while. It was interesting to see him. I thought it was cool. It's hard, because they use voice actors with a lot of these people, and it's not the same. So you got to get adjusted to that. But, I mean, he seemed menacing. The scene, I think, that you're referencing when he shows up and he's talking to Agent Tyranny and, what is it? Pyre.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he uses the Force, through space and has them, pointing their blasters at each other. I think that was a really intense moment where it's like, oh, yeah, he's not messing around at all.
It was intense. I think one of the most intense moments in, like, Resistance, Star Wars Resistance history, there was a couple scenes like that. Well, I mean, fairly frequent scenes like that in Rebels where it was like kind of intense or whatever. That didn't happen very often on Resistance, but that was up there. Like when the Inquisitor decapitated those two. We didn't go that far.
No,
but I was feeling like, ooh, this is pretty threatening, menacing, as you said. So that was cool. And I personally, I don't know. I was happy that they were willing to present him as pretty menacing, pretty evil, pretty intense, even though this is like airing post The Rise of Skywalker, post Ben Solo Redemption, whatever.
Right.
Like, he was still Kylo Ren, and the way Kylo's presented in The Rise of Skywalker in the beginning of the movie is still very focused and very, he is the supreme leader. That's his purpose. And so I was glad to see that they didn't try to like dial that back at all just because of the redemption thing.
No, they turned it up to 11.
Yeah. Well, at least in terms of Star Wars Resistance.
Yeah. For their scale, obviously.
It's not necessarily him coming in and tossing Bulio's head down on a conference room table. But, in the world of Star Wars Resistance, I think it's a show aimed at 6-year-olds or whatever. It's pretty intense for
absolutely.
Kylo. So, yeah, that was really cool. And then, basically, like, heading towards the end of the first half of the episode, you have the reunion sequence between Tam and Yeager and Kaz on Castellan.
Mm-hmm.
I thought everything about this was great. I thought the fact that they chose to set it on Castellan, it didn't make a lot of sense in the plot. I didn't feel like it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, well, there's no way that Tam would ask them to meet her in a different like sector and star system than she was in with the First Order. I mean, I guess it makes sense to get some distance between her and the First Order, but if she's like, "Oh, we're going to go out on a mission, we'll hyperspace away from here," it just seemed a little far-fetched, I guess.
Well, I think the idea there was that, she sent the encoded transmission, so in case the transmission got, decoded, they never said specifically what planet they were going to. They said the home of Bebo, or whatever.
Bebo.
So then they knew to go to Castellan, and then she covered it up by doing a training mission. Well, where it all went awry was when they hyperspaced away for training, because I think training was supposed to be just right there in the sector they were in. So that's when it was like, oh, okay. And then they're like, okay, they're going to Castellan. And from there, chaos ensues.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're going to try to ditch the First Order, you want to get away from them. And if you're meeting your friends, you don't want it to be like, within a stone's throw of where this whole Star Destroyer is. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it almost would have made more sense to me if she was just run away, not try to cover it with like I'm on a training mission.
Right.
But that's a small gripe, because I think like putting it on Castellan was great, because you had the imagery of the rings that they used to fly through. That was such a big part of season 1. So I thought that was really cool to see.
And to see it all weathered now, because it had been abandoned and they're not using it for racing anymore. Obviously, I haven't been there for a long time. So, yeah, it was really cool to return to that planet. It's such a beautiful planet, too. It was just nice to see the return of that planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminded me of the Rise of Skywalker with the, the window from the Death Star and all that kind of thing. Like, just kind of bringing everything full circle, and reminding you like, hey, this is where we've been, and now it's over. Like, to do that, to have that kind of imagery with Castellan was really cool. So what were your impressions of that scene, that reunion on Castellan?
I thought it was really great, seeing after they finally, she defeats all of the other TIEs that she's with, except for Rucklin. Because Rucklin was in the TIE with her, and she knocked him out. And then, she gets out of the TIE, and, Kaz starts talking to her, and, before Kaz can even finish his sentence, she just goes ahead and gives him a hug, and, you can tell how much she missed them and how sorry she was for the decision she had made, and it was a really touching moment.
Yeah. I was surprised how emotional it was. I hate Ruckland. I do want to throw that out there. He's really annoying. My kids were like, and I don't know what this says about me as a parent or whatever, but my kids were like, why doesn't she just kill him, or why doesn't she just ditch him or whatever? Like, he's the worst. And he is. He's pretty bad. Although it's cool that he was played by Elijah Wood, which, I think a lot of people may have missed. But anyway, I thought that scene was really affecting. I thought just, again, the imagery, her jumping off of the TIE onto that ring or whatever, I guess really onto the transport ship, but all that stuff was really cool. And then I loved the way that Kaz was just like, with open arms, like, hey, welcome back, Tam. But that Yeager and Tam, they still had a little bit of conflict there. Yeah. I thought that was really well done.
As any father-daughter combo would, even, it's not his actual daughter, but he, losing his family, Yeager always thought of Tam as a daughter. And so, they have to squabble a little.
Right. And well, and the whole thing that pushed her into going to the First Order was feeling like she was lied to by
this Yeager. Surrogate father figure.
Yeah. And so, she's like, hey, I didn't know if you'd forgive me or if you would trust me. And he's like, well, it's hard because you did this awful thing. You ran off to the First Order. And she's like, well, what do you expect? You were lying to me, you know? And so that like conflict is still there, then like just disappear because she showed up again. So I thought that was really, really well done. It is funny though. She's like, I can't leave Ruckland. I will murder these other 2 TIE fighter pilots just for coming on this training mission with me. But it's Star Wars, so yeah, that kind of thing has to happen.
Because we actually know that character, unlike the rest of her squad, which was nameless characters.
Yeah.
And Ruckland was annoying, but he was also kind of that constant reminder of the Colossus tour, having them join at the same time and be together the whole time. That was our reminder to the audience and to her. She always had the connection to the Colossus and could never escape it, even though Ruckland had firmly moved on and wanted nothing to do with him. He was bad dude.
And it's a clear way to differentiate her from the rest of the recruits to the First Order, because she signed up along with the rest of those people like Ruckland, but she did not, lose her sense of morality or whatever.
Right.
Like
she just wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess, they are going to get away. The Star Destroyer shows up. They're going to get away. But then they get pulled in by that tractor beam. And so then they're going to be stuck on the Star Destroyer. And, there's some fun stuff, some tense or compelling stuff throughout there, them trying to get away and then being stuck on the Star Destroyer and all that. But I think what's particularly interesting about it is then it puts the Colossus and Doza specifically in a position where it's like, are we going to do something about it, or are we going to let them go? Because that's a big deal to try to take on a Star Destroyer, and maybe we just have to say it was too risky and they got caught. And so I was hoping that the finale would do this. I assume the finale would do this, but this also provided an opportunity to bring in really the whole Colossus crew in a very small way for most of them, but it reminded you, because this is your last episode, this is like the last moments that you'll spend with this show, so they're able to bring all these characters back in this sequence at Aunt Z's when Doza has to try to convince them to do their thing.
I thought that was fantastic. I mean, some of my favorite parts of the Resistance were these, small minor characters that you only see here and there, but they're some of the most fun characters, and looking back, they're some of my favorites from the season. So, and both seasons actually. So to see them all get their little moments and all, as a group and as a family, to decide that they're going to stay and fight, I thought was fantastic.
It was cool, and it was like, okay, so there was the I forget what species or whatever he is, but the furry little alien that's always like shining the floors or whatever.
The janitor.
Yeah, it was cool that he showed up.
He's great. He's probably my favorite background character. I love him so much.
Yeah, he was cool, and I forget their names, Flix and
Orca.
Flix and Orca.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, they were great in the show in general. They had a very minor role here.
Yeah,
but it was just nice to see them and hear them again. And I enjoyed the way they did it too, because it was like Doza had to go to the rest of the Colossus and be like, hey, let's risk everything to save Kaz, and Tam. And they're kind of like, we're not fighting a Star Destroyer. And also Tam made her choice, So I think that was a realistic kind of reaction. And it would have been too easy if he would have been like, hey, should we all be like real good dudes and go save Kaz? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. It would be a little too easy. So I really like the fact that rather than having something like that, you have Doza going, them saying no, but then when they see that Kaz and Yeager and Tam are in real trouble, they actually see it with their own eyes through that hologram transmission. But they also see, I think, that Kaz and Tam and Yeager are selfless in that they say like they're risking, and their lives are already in danger, but they're risking their lives even more to get that message out to the Colossus to say, get away, Colossus. We don't want our demise to be your demise, And then I think that's totally logical and also, pretty emotionally affecting for that to be the thing where the Colossus says, okay, we got to go save him. So the way that whole scene played out, I thought was really good. And again, one of the best kind of moments in Resistance in general.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Then we do get to see the Aces back in action again as the fighter squadron for the Colossus. Ryan and I in the past talked a lot about like, well, the Aces are really cool, but they don't do anything with them, you know,
Right.
which was kind of a thing in this show. They didn't do a lot with the Aces throughout the history of the show, but they got their moment to shine here. What's his name? Hype Phase On. It's like, oh, well, one ace is worth 10... 12?
Yeah, I think so.
One ace is worth 12 TIE fighters.
Yep.
Which I don't know how that math works out exactly, but...
They are very talented, but, I mean, they were just racers. But,
Yeah.
you know, early on in the season, they set up, you know, Yeager as their kind of new leader, and they obviously had to do a lot of battles. So I think it kind of shows, I guess, how much better they've got at you know, combat in the sky, you know, versus just racing.
Yeah.
You know, Hype started off as this very selfish racer, and by the end, I think he was fully a team member willing to, you know, do what needs to be done to take on the TIE pilots.
Yeah, Hype was fun. He definitely still had his kind of cockiness or whatever.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he was, you know, he was devoted to the Colossus and not just in it for himself, which is a Star Wars story arc that we've seen a few times, you know. Just like the Tam thing is something we've seen a few times, but it worked well. And Hype was a smaller... it was a smaller role, so, you know, it's not like you need to devote all this, or I guess it's not like you need to tell a super nuanced kind of story with a minor character like that. So I thought what they did with Hype was fun, and what they did with the Aces was fun. I think there were times in Season 1 and Season 2 where instead of going off on these like sort of single episode, not ultimately super important stories, where they could have done some more with the Aces, I think that may have been... you know, a little more fun for the show overall, but they got their shine in this last episode, and it was definitely cool. I guess speaking of getting their shine, CB23 too, also awesome towards the end of this episode. The way I put it in the notes is that you've got the Aces outside battling, and then you've got Tam Yeager and Kaz on the inside of the Star Destroyer helping, so it's like a kind of 1-2 combo. But CB23 is like an important part of that crew as well.
Absolutely, yeah. If you know, she doesn't take down the shields, then, you know, nothing happens. They don't get to... their attack outside is completely unsuccessful. They can be 1 to 12 ties all they want. It's not going to matter if they can't take down the Star Destroyer.
Is CB23 a she?
She is, I believe.
She is.
Yeah, they only reference that because they almost always refer to her as CB23, and then just like once or twice I picked up where they were like, oh, you know, she, and you know, her color scheme, I guess, kind of plays towards that a little bit because she's got the reddish, pinkish, and then the lighter blue. But I'm pretty sure that CB23 is meant to be a girl droid.
Okay, cool.
Which is cool because we get a lot of guy droids. A lot of almost all the main character droids through animated and live action have all been male droids. So
yeah, I remember somewhere around the time of The Force Awakens coming out, we were kind of debating that, like, is BB-8 gonna be a he or a she? You know, so yeah, that is cool. CB23, I feel well, I don't feel bad, but I mean, like, BB-8 was featured in Season 1. BB-8 was great, and then CB23 came in as the replacement droid, and, you know, is really very similar to BB-8 in most respects. They did work as a pair a little bit in Season 1 towards the end, I think, right? Before Poe and BB-8 had to leave because the series was about to cross over into Force Awakens era storytelling.
Right.
But I kind of forgot about CB23, you know, towards the end of Season 2, or I guess in most of Season 2. I don't think she was in it as much as BB-8 was in Season 1. But you just watched it. I mean, like, was CB23 pretty...
I mean, she's kind of always there with Kaz, so when Kaz gets into danger, I mean, I think a lot of times she's able to kind of bail him out, you know, here and there. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think this animated series compared to the others maybe had the least droid influence. You know, CB23 did not have a role similar to Chopper, I don't think.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Bucket was Yeager's droid, you know, had almost no role in the show. You know, originally when I came, I'm like, oh, Bucket's going to be like our new Chopper. And then there's nothing really to speak of there from a character development standpoint. I think in hindsight, I wish CB23 maybe would have been the ball droid we had the whole series. Like, it was cool that BB-8 because there was that connection there, but obviously, long term CB-8 or BB-8 had its own, had his own story to go tell in the the movies. So I think maybe we should have just had CB23 maybe the whole time with Kaz being the little combo.
Yeah, that could have been cool for sure. I guess CB23 was featured pretty prominently in that season opener, and then gets some shine again in the finale. So that much is good at least. Another menacing scene from Kylo Ren when he, and this is foreshadowed early in the episode, but he like straight up chokes Tierney to death.
Yeah.
Now I guess you could argue like, hey, we don't see her die on screen, so maybe he would have been like, oh, just scaring you for a second time. But I think the implication for sure is that you failed me again, and like Darth Vader before me, I will choke you out as a result. We don't see him name her replacement like Vader would usually do, afterwards, and we don't actually see her die, which I think is good for.
Well, and the Star Destroyer blows up, so we didn't need a replacement name because they were seconds from going on, and he knew it. That's why he did that. She was like, "Oh, I'm close. I just need reinforcements." He's like, "No, I'm not adding more. We're
not wasting more resources on this failure."
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I was glad to see that, he kind of, again, had this like menacing moment. I also think it's best that they don't show that death on screen for the little kid audience watching the show. But my kids, when the episode was over, were like, what happened to Ruckland and what happened to whoever? And I was like, well, I think they're all dead because that Star Destroyer blew up, so I don't think Ruckland made it off. I don't think anybody did.
No, I don't think so. Only people made it off were in the shuttles that went out before it blew up when they went over to the Colossus, and then the final shuttle with our crew of people that we wanted to see escape. Like, that was it. Those couple shuttles and whatever ties maybe were in the air, but I think those all got taken out too. So not a whole lot of survivors there.
Yeah, and that's reminding me, towards the end of the episode, then, or at the very end of the episode, I guess, you do see, because there was and this was kind of similar to the Rise of Skywalker almost a little bit, you had this like ground-to-ground combat between the members of the Colossus, or the residents of the Colossus, and the stormtroopers that came over on the transport. It does remind me a little bit of the end of Rise of Skywalker with, like, the battle on the deck of the Star Destroyer over Exegol, where you have like these Sith troopers and stormtroopers landing on transports and then fighting the resistance troops that are also there on the deck or whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was cool in this episode when it was over, you kind of got like the hallways of the Colossus, and you saw that there were like stormtrooper prisoners there, and you saw like sort of the aftermath of this battle. Which was just, I don't think it's particularly significant necessarily, but it was just like a nice little touch to see that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was
a cool visual for sure.
Yeah, kind of unexpected in that regard. But yeah, I mean, that really is like the end of the episode. Besides the final kind of moment, the Star Destroyer is attacked from the inside by Kaz, Tam, Yeager, CB-23. The aces hit it on the outside. Is it CB-23 that brings the shield down?
Yeah.
So that they can... CB-23 brings the shield down so that they can kind of go in for that final run on the engines. And yeah, they blow it up. The Colossus takes out a Star Destroyer, which is pretty impressive for that ship. And so the Resistance is victorious as far as that goes. It is interesting. Well, I don't know. It does feel like the show could have continued if they had wanted it to.
Yeah.
Because they had that final victory, but it's not like the conflict between the First Order and the Resistance is over.
No. But they're not Resistance. I mean, Kaz is, but like the rest of them, other than like Doza, what is Doza? The girl Doza.
Yeah, Captain Doza's wife.
Yeah.
Or you mean Tora, his daughter?
No, not Tora's mom.
Yeah, Tora's mom.
She's Resistance and Kaz Resistance. But the rest of them, they fought and they stood up against the First Order, but they're not Resistance.
That's true.
They're just wanting to go back to living their normal lives. And the First Order is still out there as a threat, but the the specific First Order people, they all got handled by the end of the season. I mean, like with the blowing up of the Star Destroyer, everyone had kind of been handled. We'd have to introduce a whole new cast of First Order bad guys to chase the Resistance or the Colossus crew now.
Yeah, I suppose it's true. I guess I'm just thinking that there's this like year in between the Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker. And I don't know, because I feel like sort of like what Captain Doza's story is that he's now all in on the Resistance again,
True.
That he's decided like he can't run away anymore. So I'm curious what would happen. Like,
right.
Tora Doza seems like a shoe-in to join the Resistance, right? So the Doza family could definitely be in. I don't think that Kaz would just like hang out back on the Colossus going forward.
No threat, right?
Yeah, I think
we even saw that earlier in the season when he was like, once they settled on Eos, he's like, well, if there's no conflict now, I'm gonna go help the Resistance. Like, I need to keep helping people. I'm not ready to just settle down.
Yeah, well, and then you also think like Kylo Ren didn't want to send more resources to help win that battle in that moment or whatever, but I would think the Colossus would still be on the in the sights of the First Order, unless the First Order is going to react by saying, wow, we definitely can't win a battle against that ship, we'll just leave them alone. I wouldn't think that's what they would do
that
either.
Doesn't seem very First Order like.
Yeah, so I guess just seems like until the conflict between the First Order and the Resistance is over, there's still more story to tell there if they wanted to. So it does make me think that it's probably the show ending after 2 seasons has more to do with
the future of animation than the stories of the show itself.
Yeah, the future of animation, or maybe a tepid reaction to season 1, like not being super well received and probably not doing huge numbers and that kind of thing. Maybe they were just like, well, this could be 2 seasons.
It did seem to come out of nowhere when we watched that, trailer for season 2, because they didn't tell us at the panel. Then we watched that trailer months later, and it was like, you have it through the trailer, and it's like, and the final season, everyone is like, what?
Yeah. Now, I will say, that being said, like, this is clearly, I think, a situation where by the time they got to writing and producing this last episode, they knew it was their last episode, because it does feel very final. Like we mentioned earlier, there's the imagery of them returning to Castellan, and there's this like broken down, ring from before, and the reunion of those characters and the place where they started is very, it's a very kind of neat and clean, kind of way to wrap that up. But then just the final, and I thought the music in that scene from before was really great, and then I thought the music in this final scene of the episode was really good too, when you had the reunion now between, obviously, Kaz and Yeager and Tam had been together on the Star Destroyer, but when she returns to the Colossus and she sees Tora and Captain Doza, and then the best was when Niku showed up and she saw Niku, and that was one of Niku's like only big moments in the episode too. Wasn't a whole lot of Niku in the back half of season 2. Is that fair to say? Or
yeah, he definitely was quieter. I think his role was more just being the engineer, keeping the the Colossus fixed up and everything. Yeah, just like small character moments, but nothing like big from a story standpoint, I don't think. Yeah,
because I love Niku. My kids definitely love Niku. Like he was the character. Like we'd watch an episode, he was the one that they would talk about like more than not. He'd be the one that would come up. So. It was good.
I'm still sad I'm never gonna get a Niku toy.
I know, man. No Wave 2 of Star Wars Resistance toys, which is definitely a bummer.
I bought all those Wave 1 toys and I was all excited about it, and I was like, Niku is my favorite character. To this day, he's my favorite character from the show. And I was, when they had that series 1, I was like, oh, cool. These are good start, and then we'll get some more characters filled out in the next wave, and I don't think we're ever gonna get that wave of toys.
No, it doesn't seem that way. It does not seem that way. So yeah,
we never got Tam either.
No Tam. Which I mean, now in I almost feel like in this final episode, Kaz took a back seat a little bit to Tam, and like Tam almost became the main character there. So it was a bummer not to get a Tam toy. No, some Aces, ships would have been cool too. Like there was definitely room for that kind of stuff if the show had been more well received, or I don't think it was a big hit with kids either. It didn't seem like in general, but if they don't have a dad who's like all into Star Wars or a mom who's all into Star Wars who's going to make them watch it, then,
Right.
I don't think my kids would have known about it really. But cartoons, even just in general, I don't think don't have the same kind of hold over kids as they once did, which is just I guess how it goes.
Yeah.
Things are changing.
For
So,
sure.
But anyway, back to that last scene.
Yes.
I loved the last scene. I thought it was really great. Now, I don't watch or have never really watched a lot of anime. I don't know. Are you like a anime fan? Have you watched much
not
of
too
that?
much.
Not too much. I got strong anime vibes, and I hadn't really thought about it lately. But I remember when the show was first announced and we were first seeing some footage of it and stuff, like me not having really ever watched much anime, I was like, oh, this reminds me of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker on GameCube.
Sure.
It was like an ocean, and that was like the thing with the Wind Waker. But just the style of it and all that, it just kind of reminded me of that. And it was very bright and colorful and whimsical. And I think that is probably an anime influence on the show more than we've seen on Clone Wars and Rebels.
Absolutely.
And again, I haven't watched a lot of anime, but the final moment when like the music felt like it had like an anime kind of vibe to it. And then just like the shots themselves and just like the group together, I don't know. It just like I've never even really watched the Pokemon, anime or really any anime, but I was like, this reminds me of like, anime, even though I haven't really seen anime. So maybe I'm off on that, but I feel like I feel like it's there. I don't know.
Yeah.
What'd you think about that final scene?
Yeah, absolutely. I maybe wasn't picking up on all the anime vibes as much as you, but
I might be making that up, like I said, because I don't even really know anime.
But I mean, it has that art style to it, so I mean, it totally makes sense that it would have some stuff like that. But I just thought it was touching. Always going back to Auntie's and having that kind of be like a place that we can return to. And, it starts off with just the three of them four. Niku had joined them by then, and they get their drinks, and Anzi has a great line, price just went up as she's, swatting a stormtrooper off of her table and everything. And then, for Team Fireball, is their toast, and then you see everyone else come in and you're like, better yet, Team Colossus. And, it was really touching. It was this, greater story. Star Wars is about family and, these non-traditional families in a lot of cases. And to see this whole, group of people kind of come together as one big family at the end was just really emotional and touching.
Yeah, it was. And it was like just a nice bookend to the show, to have them all there on the Colossus. And Z was a fan favorite, I think for a lot of people. So it was cool to have her be part of it. But yeah, it was just like it was a warm kind of, lighthearted show in general. And I felt like it was good. It had about as epic of a finale as you could have for a show like this. So that conclusion was great.
Yeah.
I guess, we really didn't talk very much because that about does it for this finale, but we didn't really talk much about Tam and her redemption, which I think was the strongest part of the finale. I think was like the strongest part about season 2 now in retrospect, and it was probably the smartest thing that the show did. And one of the, probably the primary thing that really made the show interesting in the long run was Tam and her relationship with Yeager and with Kaz in season 1, and then her running off and joining the First Order, and then the will they won't they of bringing her back in season 2. I thought all that was probably the strongest element of the show, and then I thought they did a really great job with her redemption in this episode. And I guess, they're planting the seeds kind of leading up to this episode a little bit, but they really did. And maybe that's one of the reasons I feel like this could be almost like a self-contained little Star Wars movie, because they really did. The bulk of it was done in this 45-minute episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that they open it up with Eos being destroyed, her deciding that's too much, I can't take it. And then, kind of her hatching this plan to leave. But yeah, I just thought it was so good. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I thought it was really good. It's only 2 months, a month and a half since the Rise of Skywalker came out, and so redemption and how redemption should be handled and all that stuff is still pretty fresh in people's minds. And there's a lot of different kind of takes on the Kylo Ren thing and the Ben Solo thing. But I feel like the way that was handled in the Rise of Skywalker personally is more intense, a little more probably. You have an audience that's going to look at that story in a little bit more realistic kind of way, or have expectations that are more adult in terms of how that stuff's going to be handled. And then this is a very bright and colorful show for kids, and so I think the way they handled it in Resistance really fits and matches the tone of the show. But I was glad, it was like I was happy when I was watching The Rise of Skywalker to see Ben Solo throw his lightsaber into the ocean, and I was happy to see him come back and help Rey. And I know some fans are very upset that he then died in the end, but I thought that was like this really selfless choice he made, and I was really satisfied with all that. Just my take, but when it comes to Resistance, I feel like this was the way that it should go. It worked out really well. Mm-hmm. I don't see why they wouldn't welcome her back with open arms. And
right.
She had run off and learned to fly a TIE fighter. But just like Finn in The Force Awakens, the first time they really asked her to do something evil, she was out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So for her to come back and be welcomed with open arms, it's like, yeah, you lost your way, but when it mattered most, you figured it out.
Absolutely. Yeah, she never did anything, irredeemable, really. She just went off to go learn to be a pilot,
Yeah.
Because earlier, the other times that we'd seen her kind of on the edge was always her choosing to help the Colossus or not. She was, in battle once with, Kaz and the other aces, and she didn't, kill any of them or anything. Like, she always had these, these moments of like, that's too far. And so the Aos thing at the beginning of this episode, I think, just brings that full force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, Star Wars Resistance Season 2 finale, The Escape, I believe it's called. I thought it was fantastic. Really satisfied with it. I don't know. I don't score this stuff, but I would say like it was my favorite episode of Resistance, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I really do think like, I will go back and watch this from time to time. All of Star Wars Resistance will be on Disney Plus starting sometime next month, or actually this month, towards the end of February. It's all going to be up there. So right now you can watch Season 1 on Disney Plus, but all of it will be on Disney Plus later this month. So I think that'll be good.
That can only help with people, watching it. It's just so easy when something's on Disney Plus to check it out and just kind of stream it whenever you want. So maybe it'll catch some more eyes down the road, as it's just sitting there.
Yeah. I was about to say like, so if you're listening to this and you haven't watched Star Wars Resistance, you can go check it out on Disney Plus. Yeah. But we did just spoil every major plot point in the Season 2 finale.
I think it's still a compelling story, though. It's a kid's show. There's nothing about it that's necessarily earth-shattering, but it's it's compelling to watch, and if you love Star Wars, there's a lot to like about it. It's a really fun show.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. Yeah, I think that's true. Actually, it's not like spoiling, The Last Jedi or something. It's a small stakes story, and it would still be totally fun to watch. Especially if you start, like, if you're listening and you haven't watched any Resistance and you were to go back and watch all of it from beginning to end, Tam's coming back. So I guess, but come on. Yeah. Didn't we know Tam was coming back?
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't really.
It'd have been more surprising if she didn't.
Yeah, right. So cool. Okay, well, with that being said, that chapter is closed as far as Star Wars animation goes. We have Star Wars: The Clone Wars Season 7 coming back on Disney Plus in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the date? Like, is it
Monday, February
20 something?
Yeah, maybe
21st.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I want to say. I'm excited. I mean, I'm not counting down the days on my calendar like I was before, a new Star Wars movie comes out or something, but I am excited. But I'm not quite as much of a Clone Wars, person as a lot of Star Wars fans are. I know you're pretty big on Clone Wars, right?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. I wasn't necessarily watching it as it was coming out, but I went back and watched it all later, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really excited to see it come back. When they announced that it was going to have a final return season, especially because of the nature of how the show ended, not being able to tie up a lot of its loose ends. Like it was able to do it through some other media and whatnot, but to see it, get its final say, to finally put its the bow on the show, I think is going to be great. And I think everyone's really excited about it, including myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the thing with me is I enjoyed the Clone Wars. I liked Rebels more, which kind of, I think makes me the exception to the rule more than the common reaction is. Yeah, I was kind of more into Rebels. Part of it is because I was down with Rebels like from day one, where I was with Clone Wars. It was more like I'd watch some episodes, here and there. I remember DVRing it during some of the seasons and watching it with, my older son now, who was like really young at the time. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like, I don't know, it just, the idea of Star Wars moving forward, and it just didn't, it felt like a cartoon, based on Star Wars. Whereas now some of this stuff comes out and it feels like it's more instrumental in the larger story. And I'm following all the elements of Star Wars a lot more closely than I was at that time. Cause then I sort of looked at it like, well, hey, Star Wars is these 6 movies that I love. We'll never get any more movies. So, maybe I'll read a book here and there. Maybe I'll watch a cartoon, because I like Star Wars. But what I was a fan of was the 6 movies. Whereas now as a Star Wars fan, still the thing I'm most into are the Star Wars movies, but I'm much more of a fan of the overall thing. Anyway, I'm excited for it, but I feel like I've gone back and watched some Clone Wars, here and there, but like, I almost feel like I need like a refresher or something, I need to like really sit down and do some homework, like one weekend, just watch a bunch of Clone Wars or, spend some time reading, synopses and stuff like that, just to like catch up, because I feel like I watched the trailer and like, oh yeah, this stuff is cool. But people start talking about certain battles and certain troopers and all this stuff. And like, I don't really remember that stuff all that well.
Sure.
How recently have you watched it?
Yeah, I think it's been a while for me as well. So I'm in a similar boat to you where, I need to do some more research as well to kind of prep myself to get ready for this final. So, like, I'm excited about it, but, I think it'll be one of those things where, you might watch an episode and then you'll go and read about like old stuff to put the pieces together and maybe rewatch the episode then to kind of be like, oh, okay, now I remember and, put all those pieces together and understand, because of the nature of Clone Wars, a lot of it kind of jumps around, so to, know which, it's not one long story completely. So to know what pieces go with what stuff, I think will, enhance the experience all the more.
Yeah. What do you think we might be getting as far as, or what do you hope to see as far as Star Wars animation goes going forward? We're going to get this season of the Clone Wars. It's going to be, hopefully great, but it's pretty short, right? Like 9 episodes, 12 episodes?
12 episodes, I think. Yeah. Hopefully lots of Darth Maul for your sake.
Well, hey, Maul in Clone Wars at this point is an accepted fact. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you've gotten to that point, at least.
Well, I'm kind of at that point. I guess, maybe I'm overselling it by saying it's an accepted fact. But, like, yeah, no, like, seeing him in the Clone Wars, that ship has sailed. Like, he's all over the Clone Wars fine. You know what I mean? When he starts popping up in The Mandalorian or, more solo movies or shows or something, it's like, okay, well, that might be a little harder for me to accept. Not a fan of the Maul cameo in Solo, which I think I've talked about on the show before, I'm sure. Yeah. But I'm fine with seeing Maul in Clone Wars. I mean, he was in Rebels, and I liked kind of how they used him in Rebels. So
you liked that his story ended.
I did like that part of it, but some of the other stuff with him was cool too. So if we're going back in time before Rebels, I can deal with some Maul.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's an instrumental part of the story, whether you like it, if he's your favorite character or not. He's, especially for the stuff we're going to see, I think, because as we get closer and closer to Revenge of the Sith time now, when this season of Rebels, like, we know Anakin's story, we know Obi-Wan's story. It's more Darth Maul and Ahsoka are kind of the main characters we have left that we don't really know how their story goes. Like, we know longer down the road where they show up again, but this area of their story is very unknown. And so I think a lot of these episodes might focus kind of on their story more than, Anakin and Obi-Wan. Yeah.
And I mean, I think Mandalorian culture too, could definitely play a big role in the Clone Wars, coming off of the Mandalorian. I think that would make a lot of sense. Although the way the Mandalorian culture is presented in Clone Wars is pretty different than how it's presented in the Mandalorian, but maybe this season could help bridge that gap in some way. Explain some of the things like why they have helmets on all the time and that sort of stuff.
Well, I think that Great Purge might be something, because I think the Purge, at least from the references in The Mandalorian, is what that maybe big turning point event was, to have them kind of change their whole culture. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, just from a timeline standpoint, that seems like something that might have happened more along the lines of the original trilogy. Okay. So I don't know that we'll see that here, but we can still start moving towards that direction, but there might be even more future storytelling to really get us to that point where we understand that whole complete change in philosophy from them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that does make sense. Yeah. Okay, well, what do you think, though, post-Clone Wars? You know, we've got Clone Wars coming out. What are you looking forward to, or what would you like to see as far as animation goes?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to, and the rumors out there kind of supporting, is that we're going to get a Rebels sequel. You know, Rebels came to an end with multiple plot threads kind of left open. And so I'm a huge Ahsoka fan. She's my favorite part of the Clone Wars and one of my favorite Star Wars characters. So I want to see more of Ahsoka's story, and that means getting a Rebels sequel. You know, her and Sabine going to find Ezra, and wherever they went with the space whales. I've seen some things that we could be getting an announcement in the coming months that'll be the next show, maybe this fall. And I'm all for that. I mean, beyond that, I want to see, you know, Star Wars animation, like I want to see Star Wars movies and kind of all Star Wars stuff. I want to see it go kind of outside of this time period that we've been in the last 40 years. But first, I think I want to see that Rebels sequel.
The Rebels sequel. Cool. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely smoke around that rumor, you know, that we could be getting that. And I mean, definitely like kind of knowing how Dave Filoni seems to operate and stuff, you know, sticking a drawing of an Ahsoka up on Instagram every 6 months or something, just so you know she's not really dead. And like, I mean, you wouldn't think she's dead because she was alive in Rebels at the end, and that was like at the, you know, the furthest point in the timeline. Right. Though the Rise of Skywalker kind of makes it seem like she would be dead at that point, but that's quite a while later. That's a long time later.
That's fair at that point.
It'd be kind of, I don't know if it'd be unreasonable for her to still be alive at the time of the Rise of Skywalker, but
she'd be pretty old.
Certainly just as reasonable for her not to be alive anymore.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that is like a thing that, like, man, I don't know. Dave Filoni probably doesn't really help with that kind of thing, but that's like one of those, to me, it's like if people are upset that the Rise of Skywalker suggests Ahsoka is dead, it's like, we got to calm down, because characters die. They will die. Like she would be old. It would be okay for her.
Even if she didn't have, you know, some dramatic death like Yoda, you know, people do just get old and die.
It would be okay for her not to be around anymore. So, but I feel like Dave Filoni's like almost one of the, like, the people leading, I mean, in a lighthearted way, but almost one of the people leading the charge of, like, we can't let go of certain characters. You know what I mean? Because, like, God, Ahsoka, I'm glad she's not dead. I'm glad that she was in Rebels. I think she was cool in Rebels, and I'm interested to see where she goes. And I like the fact that in Rebels they kind of made the choice to take her off of the galactic, you know, chessboard or whatever, so that it's like, well, how come you didn't just have Ahsoka take on Darth Vader? Well, you couldn't, because she was who knows where.
Yep.
And I think that whatever they do with this show with Sabine and Ahsoka, or Ahsoka and Ezra, or whoever it'll be, it'll have to be probably outside of the original trilogy timeline. I don't think it'll be set like in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi or anything. I don't know.
Well, because the show Rebels ends before A New Hope, right?
Yeah, but then they do a flash forward, and it's actually after. Okay, I'm a little hazy on my memory of that. I'm a little hazy on my memory of that finale. I think it was meant to be post Return of the Jedi, maybe?
So what were they doing the whole time during the original trilogy? If
they
had started that journey to find Ezra.
Okay, all right, maybe not. Okay, I got to go back and research that.
It couldn't have been too long, because that Hare's child with Kanan was fairly young still, so I think maybe only a little bit of time had passed.
Yeah, but Rebels is like right up on A New Hope, isn't it? Almost. And
I guess the original
A New Hope to Return of the Jedi is only a couple of years.
Yeah, it doesn't span too long. So yeah, okay.
I wanted to say I thought it was like post Return of the Jedi.
Okay. That makes
sense. I don't know. You know what? You know why Ahsoka wasn't around in the original trilogy? Because she had not been created yet. So there you go. I guess that's all the explanation you need.
But what about you? I mean, are you excited for that show, or what are you looking forward to in animation going forward?
Yeah, I'm excited for that show. I think I would be excited to see some animated movies, potentially. Mm-hmm. Like I said, like I loved the Resistance finale, and I feel like it could have been like a really fun, you know, kind of animated movie. And I don't want to see them put out 10 of those a year or anything, but if they put out 1 or 2 animated movies a year, I think that could be cool. I would be for sure interested in new timelines, but I wonder how willing they would be to explore a new part of the timeline in animation
before the movies do.
Before a movie does. Yeah, because it's like, well, on the one hand, in the animation and Star Wars storytelling in general is restricted by being stuck in like the original trilogy or the sequel trilogy era or whatever. It is restricting, but then on the other hand, it's also that's, they're intentionally restricting it to that because they want to leave that. You don't want to restrict what a movie can do,
right?
Because we've already explored it in a cartoon,
Absolutely.
And there is a large enough contingent of Star Wars fans who pay close enough attention to this stuff that they would cry foul if, and I just don't think they want to, tie their hands like that. So,
well, what if we decide to, put movies in one new timeline and animation in another? You can really go anywhere with this. You can theoretically, take animation and movies, have them explore new timelines, both separate from each other, so they're both free to do whatever, and at the same time we're moving away from this Skywalker saga that we've been playing in for 40 something years now.
No, I mean I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Like if
I don't know how likely it is, but I mean it's something to think about.
Yeah, that could be cool. I mean, part of me is also, I guess this is the old man in me or whatever, but part of me is like, how about a Luke Skywalker cartoon? You know what I mean? His story's been told from beginning to end now. Like, let's get some Luke Skywalker. Maybe in between Empire and Jedi or post Jedi. We do have the comics for that. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
The comics will make sure to tell every second of Luke's life.
I guess, yeah.
A New Hope through.
I guess that's the problem with everything wanting to be or needing to be canonical. It's like, well, you really can't do a Luke cartoon if you want it to be a canonical Luke cartoon.
Right.
But if you make a cartoon for 8-year-olds, I don't know. Does it need to be? I don't know.
And there's something to be said too. Like we had the comic that retold the Thrawn book, so you can always have different mediums telling the same story as well.
Yeah.
So you can always adapt the comic books to a cartoon. If you like something about that Luke story there, and you're like, I want to see some Luke between A New Hope and Empire. Well, just take what is already out there and adapt it to fit the cartoon medium. You get some tweaks to it, but at the same time, you'll get that story. And some people don't read the comics, so for them it'll be a brand new story.
Yeah.
But for the people that are in everything, they'll know it, but they'll get to see how it's told in a different way.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I have no idea what they're going to do. I think the Ahsoka and Sabine show is the most likely thing, and then from there we'll see. But I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it'll probably be on Disney Plus, whatever they're going to do. And
I don't think we're getting any more Star Wars animation that's not on Disney Plus.
I mean, that's good because I don't like watching commercials, and Disney Plus, the stream sure looks a lot better than it does when I record stuff on YouTube TV or whatever. It's definitely higher quality and all that. So
I'm all on board in Disney Plus.
Yeah. So that'd be cool. Okay. How about the Rise of Skywalker, Caleb? I don't know. What's your thoughts on that movie? How many times have you seen it?
I've only seen it twice.
Okay.
Which is a little low for me. Usually, I guess not that low. I don't see them, a ton of times, but I saw The Force Awakens and Rogue One and The Last Jedi 3 times. And I saw Solo twice, and I only saw this one twice. Which is not anything about the quality of the movie. I think I just, got busy and didn't get around to it because I didn't want to go by myself necessarily. And so the reason I would see them multiple times because I had different groups of people to go see them with, and plans just never solidified. I never got around to that third viewing, I guess. But no, I thought it's a good movie. I'm definitely not in that camp of people that's outraged by it. I think there's a lot of interesting talking points from it. I can't say I love every aspect of it, but it's at the end of the day, it's Star Wars, and it feels very Star Wars.
Is it your least favorite of the sequels then?
I think so, probably.
Yeah.
But, I think overall I like the sequel trilogy a lot. I like all the Star Wars movies. I wouldn't be, sitting here talking about all this stuff if I didn't. But, yeah, it's probably my least favorite of the trilogy. I really don't like that Rey was a Palpatine. That just, the more I think about that, it doesn't really sit well with me. I don't understand it from the Emperor standpoint. Like, that just confuses me about like what he's been doing this whole time. Like, I don't get how he had offspring. Like, that's not something I really want to think about and understand. It just never seemed like something that character would be into. But her story was so interesting, being just like nobody. We can have these like Broom Boy at the end of The Last Jedi. Like, we can have these people that don't have these families that they come from and still have these extraordinary powers. Like, that the Force doesn't have to come through this fantastic bloodline. And I think she still had an interesting story to be told there. I think it was good that in the end she still chose to become a part of the Skywalker family, and I thought that was fantastic and touching. But I don't know why she needed to be a Palpatine.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I was about to say if there's one least popular thing about the Rise of Skywalker, it's that. Actually, that's probably true. I mean, because obviously there's a specific character death that's pretty unpopular, at least with some Star Wars fans. But Ben Solo. But I think that outside of that, like just generally speaking, like you do see a lot of, I feel like just anecdotally, like people I know, there's a lot of head scratching about the whole like Palpatine's granddaughter, huh? You know? And so, yeah, I agree. I think that there is a version of the Rise of Skywalker, or if there was a version of the Rise of Skywalker that omitted the Rey as a Palpatine thing, that the story would work just as well and would be better, you know?
I agree.
So yeah, I could do without the Rey Palpatine thing. I mean, I guess the devil's advocate argument to that is like, well, she doesn't really have something that's challenging her that she has to overcome personally if you don't have something like that in there. Because if it ends in The Last Jedi, well, Rey's nobody, by the end of it, she seems to have accepted that and moved past it, you know. Not moved past it like it would never be an issue for her again, but like that part of her story arc is kind of completed in The Last Jedi. She's challenged by that information. You're a nobody, you know, you don't matter in the story, whatever, blah, 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 Kylo tells her. And then, you know, she kind of is able to, you know, move past it in The Last Jedi. So then you show up and, you know, she shows up in The Rise of Skywalker, and it's like, well, what's the new thing that is kind of like frustrating her or challenging her,
sure.
You know? So I can see it from that perspective, but I don't know. I think it was just a little too wonky. It was a little too hard to swallow.
Yep.
I think it's good to shock the audience. I think it's good to surprise people. I think it's good to go into The Rise of Skywalker thinking we kind of have it figured out. Like, hey, The Last Jedi told us she's a nobody. Oh, not actually. We're changing. You know, I think that stuff is good, honestly. But yeah, there's just something about it that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, and maybe once we understand more of the how to that, and, you know, I mean, and I don't even know if they'll explain the how that works, but if they do, maybe that'll help it sit better. Like maybe when there's just it, you as soon as you heard that news, you just started like putting the puzzle pieces together in your head, and you're like, I'm missing several pieces of my puzzle. Like I'm looking at my puzzle and I'm like, it's not complete, and I don't understand, you know. Like you have this, you know, this beautiful little puzzle, and then there's just like one big thing in the middle that's like missing, and it's like once I have that there, maybe this will all, you know, make a lot more sense. But it's just, you know, getting from point A to point B there, I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm retreading ground I've already covered on the podcast at this point, but I think that is a theme with The Rise of Skywalker. Is like, how did you get from point A to point B plot-wise?
Yeah.
A lot of times doesn't make a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess how much that matters to you probably will directly impact how much you like the movie. Because for me, most of the time with The Rise of Skywalker, I'm willing to sort of be like, I don't know why that knife points to the Death Star, but I don't really care. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you're watching it, I think it's fun and it's absurd, but it's fine, and you just accept it and move on. And I think when I'm watching it and as time goes on, like I'm going to enjoy the movie, and it's a fun watch. Like it's definitely a fun watch. But when you're, you know, talking about and analyzing it, there's definitely some details that are, you know, nitpicky, and you're like, you know, I can accept that it doesn't really make sense, but you know, at the same time, it's a fun movie to watch. Like they did a good job from that standpoint. Absolutely.
I think the Palpatine thing too, it'll be interesting, you know, 5 years removed, 10 years from removed, whatever, like how that reveal sits with people, or how that element of Rey's story sits with people, you know? I'm thinking about, like, for instance, the way probably me, and I don't know how invested I was at the time Ahsoka was revealed to like have had a big reaction, but I know like a lot of people were, you know, couldn't accept Ahsoka as part of the story when the Clone Wars first debuted. You know what I mean? Right. And like that's so different now.
Yeah.
But it was shocking. Like, what do you mean Anakin had a Padawan in between Attack of the Clones and Return of the Jedi? No, he didn't.
No way.
You know, which I still, part of me, like, I accept Ahsoka. I love Ahsoka. I love a lot of the Clone Wars. The stuff that she's in is probably some of my favorite parts of the Clone Wars. But I still don't watch Revenge of the Sith and be like, oh, he just got done doing all this stuff with Ahsoka. Like, it just kind of exists separately for me anyway. But
sure.
But no, I just feel like time heals a lot of wounds as far as that stuff goes.
Absolutely.
Even with me and Darth Maul.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I watched him be cut in half. This is stupid. You know?
Spider legs.
Cut to a couple years later, and it's like, okay, well, I've had time to sit with this, and like it doesn't really matter that much to me anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like it does right now. It kind of defines how people feel about Rey. unfortunately. At least some people, but I feel like maybe as time goes on, hopefully, because it's a relatively small part of her story, honestly. You know what I mean? You look at the thing in total. I don't really feel like it changes who Rey is. It changes her backstory, but like, you know, you watch the 3 movies and like she is still the character I thought she was, you know, regardless of who she was related to. I think the choices she makes in The Rise of Skywalker only reinforce, you know, the character that I thought she was, which is like competing for my favorite character in all of Star Wars, period. And so, you know, I hope that as time goes on, like that shocking, you know, lineage will be like oh yeah, you know, that's just a thing that we know and is not such a defining factor for how people feel about Rey and the sequels.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we'll see what happens as far as all that goes. Yeah. So, cool. Okay, well, I think we can probably wrap up the show here, Caleb, unless there's any other, you know, burning Star Wars topics you wanted to bring up.
I'm sure we could talk on and on, but you know, people don't want to listen to a podcast forever. So
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Well, so if, did you want to share your Twitter handle if people want to follow you online?
Yeah. You want to follow me? I'm at Caleb Damon.
Mm-hmm. And you will be at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim. Is that correct?
Cannot wait.
Can't wait for Star Wars Celebration. Yeah. Which is like going to be coming up pretty quickly.
Yeah, before we know it.
Yeah. It's weird. In the fall, I feel like it just felt so far away because there was the Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian on the horizon and everything. But now all that stuff is behind us. It's feeling...
Once we get to the end of the Clone Wars, and we'll have a kind of a dull period there for a bit, and we'll be pretty much full force onto Celebration at that point.
Yeah.
We'll see if they make any announcements before Celebration or if they try and hold everything off until then, you know, about the future of movies and animation, all that stuff. I have a feeling we're going to hear about some of that stuff before.
I think for sure we'll hear about animation before because I guess they could hold off, but I just think that, number one, they want to continue to, like, make people aware that stuff is coming to Disney Plus.
Yep.
But then also I think like a lot of times they just they'll wait until the one thing is done. Like they announced Resistance very shortly after Rebels ended.
Yeah.
I'm sure they could have, you know, announced it earlier than that.
Right.
But you get done with one thing and then you move on to the next. So
and
I don't think they'll talk about the new animation while we're still gearing up for Clone Wars.
Exactly.
But once Clone Wars is over, then it'll be like, well, let's let people know what's next.
We're getting the Rebels sequel. They're not going to wait. Could you imagine? We wait till August and like, oh, guess what? We're doing a Rebels sequel and it comes out in 6 weeks. Whoa.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Also, if they let people think all summer long that there's going to be a Rebels sequel and then they're like, oh, hey, we're doing another show kind of like Resistance and it's 4 or 5 year olds and it has nothing to do with Ahsoka or whatever, you know, like that would also probably not land very well. So, But with Disney Plus, I mean, there could honestly be more than one animation project on the horizon too.
Yeah, who knows what they're working on right now.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, he's at Caleb Damon on Twitter, right? And the show is on Twitter at Blockade Run. You can follow us there. Also, check out our website, blockaderunnerpodcast.com, for links to everything we do. And if you have feedback on Star Wars Resistance or on the show in general, you could email us at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. So that's going to do it for Blockade Runner episode 139. Thanks for watching and or listening. And we will be back soon with more Blockade Runner Podcast.